dance. Let me see you move.
Love never felt so good. Can't I die if it ever could? Not like you. Oh.
Hi, everybody, and welcome aboard to Local Matters, where living local, well, it never felt so good. And sometimes it doesn't always feel good. That's because, according to research, in our nation, a woman is beaten every 9 seconds. 1 in 4 women will experience severe physical abuse in their lifetime. It's reported over 100 million children witness their mothers being beaten annually inside their own homes. And it's also reported approximately 3 women are murdered every day by those who say, honey, I love you. Major Eric Roberts of Anniston Salvation Army comes aboard Local Matters to talk about the ways in which the Salvation Army effects change in domestic violence and continue to provide the basic necessities of life. We'll see you right back in just a few moments. Hi, everybody, and welcome aboard to Local Matters, where living local, well, it never felt so good. Never felt so good to have joining me this morning the major of, he's the executive director of the Salvation Army here in Anniston. And he's going to be talking with me today about domestic violence. You know, it's a huge problem, not only throughout the country, but it's also a problem right here in our very own sweet state, sweet home, Alabama. So welcome aboard, Major Eric Roberts. You are the head man in charge. What's your exact title there at the Salvation Army?
Well, they only give me the title of Corps Officer there.
Corps Officer?
But we are in charge of many facets of programs of the Salvation Army in the town of Anniston and many counties surrounding as well. We are in charge of the shelters that go there. We're in charge of the family store that operates there.
And we're going to talk about those shelters too a little bit later in the show.
Social service operation that goes on there with a pantry that we give out food. So we have many hats that we have to wear with that one title, Corps Officer.
Definitely. And I wanted you to come aboard because you're new to the area here, but you're not new to this role, I understand. Tell us a little bit about, before you came to Anniston, where were you?
We were in Columbus, Mississippi. We were the Corps Officer there. We didn't have as big a program in Columbus. We didn't have shelters, but we did have the family store, and we had social services we had to offer. But this was considered a promotion for us to come to Anniston, and we were really happy and excited they chose us to do this. We have some challenges to meet here, and we're happy to get to it.
All right, and we're good to have you here. So welcome aboard to Local Matters. Welcome aboard to Calhoun County and to Anniston. So we're glad to have you. But you mentioned challenges, and you're right. There are lots of challenges that are taking place. As I mentioned earlier, not only right here in our own sweet home, Alabama, throughout the country, throughout the world for that matter. I want to bring up an ad. This ad caused quite a bit of stir earlier this year. Let's take a look at that. This happened, this ad hit the internet back in March of this year, and the ad it caused controversy, I understand, Major Eric Roberts, because according to the internet, this dress, it had something to do with the colors of the dress, even though we see it as white and gold. Salvation Army asked the question, why is it so hard to see black and white? And so many were asking, or black and blue, I'm sorry, the ad asked, why is it so hard to see black and blue? And so many were saying, well, we don't see black and blue, we see white and gold. But the emphasis that Salvation Army wanted to put out was, it was not the fact that the dress was so much black and blue, it was what was on this young woman's body.
Yeah.
Talk to us about some of the work that is being done in Salvation Army. I understand leads the way.
Yeah, throughout the world, the Salvation Army does a lot of work with domestic violence and things like this of this nature. The original thing that was put on the internet with the blue dress and the white and blue dress and the black and gold dress was something that was that caused a lot of controversy. A lot of people got in arguments over it, but this is one where it's white and gold dress, it's clearly, but you don't see the bruises so much unless you look closer. You can see the bruises on the young lady, and many times in our society, we might have ladies walking around our culture, our society, that are bruised, and they may be bruised on the inside, they may be bruised on the outside, but they're bruised and they're battered, and we don't even know it, we don't see it, and we don't give emphasis to it.
And I think that was one of the reasons that the South African chapter wanted to point out. It really wasn't about the dress. It was about this young lady. She doesn't fit the typical makeup, if you will, of an abused woman. But then again, there is no particular makeup
Right.
of a person that's being abused. And you really do have to sometimes look hard for abuse, because you mentioned to me earlier, people tend to cover that up.
They do. Through shame or embarrassment, they may just decide that I'm not going to let people know that part that's going on in my life. And so many women just need to have that hug or that kind word said to them before they can open up to what's going on.
Tell me this. Right here in Calhoun County, have you seen a lot of cases of domestic violence coming through the doors there, looking for shelter?
Well, we have a number of domestic violence shelters in the county, but or at least one or two of them. But at the Salvation Army, we have our women's shelter, and we've had women come into our shelter who have come from a domestic violence situation, and we don't really quantify that so much with that. We try to take every woman in the same. And once they're able to open up, once they feel safe and they're able to open up, they'll tell us about what they were going through.
Are your beds pretty? Are they sometimes maxed to capacity?
Not recently, but they will be. Once it gets colder months and stuff like that, we will be maxed out.
And that's something I want to talk about too. But you mentioned that, and I did some research earlier last week, and according to research, the numbers there's an increase in numbers. Typically, it can be for shelters during colder months, also during the holiday period. So do you see that?
Yeah, we do see that. In our year-to-year stats, sometimes we might see a difference, maybe even, and we're doing a good job, I think, in making sure that we do case management, so that when the lady comes into our shelter, we try to get them into an apartment when they leave. We don't just send them back out on the road. We try to get them set up into an apartment or a house or something like that, so they can be better stationed for themselves in the future. And we don't get a lot of repeat customers that way, you might say. It's a way that we sort of try to do the most good in those situations. We want to make sure that those ladies get set up in a good place where they won't need the services of the Salvation Army anymore.
And that's a good thing. So that means that apparently then you're probably working with DHR and other nonprofits.
Yes, we are.
And we'll talk about that too when we come back. We've got to go to break now, but we're going to talk more about the services that the Salvation Army provides right here in Calhoun County. So we'll be right back. Don't go away. Hi everybody, glad you could join us back here on Local Matters. I've been talking with Major Eric Roberts. He is the head person in charge, I keep saying that, at the Salvation Army here in the Anniston chapter. And we've been talking about domestic violence because it's a huge problem, not only throughout the country, but even right here in Sweet Home, Alabama. In fact, our First Lady, Diane Bentley, has even launched. And she did this earlier in the year. She set up she's working with some legislation that she thought would be important enough that two other state officials have taken that legislation on, and they're hoping to, of course, do more with that legislation. They're hoping to have better and more stringent laws when it comes to domestic violence. So I wanted to talk with you, Major Roberts, because Salvation Army is known for being right here amongst the people, helping people. We know some of the work that they do, but oftentimes we don't really fully understand the work that is being done when it comes to women who are leaving situations. And sometimes, from what I understand, they'll leave a situation for a minute, you're there, you're working with them, and then they go back to the same situation they were running from, particularly as we approach holiday times, because they feel I want to go back home, and it's holiday time, and I'll go back and things will be better. And then right after the holidays are over, they realize, oh no, I can't live another year like this. And so here they come again. So you mentioned to me that that Salvation Army, you're not doing this alone. You're working with other entities.
Yes, our case manager that works with the ladies in the shelter, she networks with other apartment landlords. She networks with other agencies, Department of Human Resources, all these different agencies to better the situation for the young ladies that come into our shelter. And many times she's working beyond the clock, so to speak, trying to find places for them to stay, or get them hooked back up with food stamps, or get their children in schools that they want to be in, and so it's a long process in that regard. But they stay in our shelter for a short amount of time, and what we're looking for, and we think the progress or the goal that really makes a good goal is that the women leave our shelter and don't have to come back, because they have a place to stay. They have everything set up for them, and that's really the goal that we're looking forward to.
And you do want to see that, because have you found, just as I mentioned earlier, have you found that to be a problem where you're working with women and children and you've gotten them to a certain point and they leave? And do you ever feel frustrated because they do leave and then you do see them back a month later?
Well, there are those cases that happen every once in a while. You can only lead someone as far as they want to go.
That's it.
And so we can't force them, or we'd be in the same situation as the abuser. Right. But
exactly.
we want to lead them in the direction that they would like to go.
Yes.
And we give them all the options that they need, and they're willing to choose. They're open. They're willing, given the opportunity to choose which option they want to have.
Now, you mentioned too that earlier, we're leading into the colder months, and so this is when you would typically see your shelters filling to capacity. And it's not just abused women. Who else would you find coming in looking for a bed?
Sometimes substandard people that have substandard housing will come to look in our shelter because there's warmth there. There's something that's warm instead of being in a cold house. It's better to be in a warm shelter maybe. And some people that just they need to get out, and so. Our shelter gets filled up in the colder months because of that. Okay.
Do you? Here's I think because I read in my research sometimes that there's a difference in beds. And it seemed as though, and this is I didn't understand this part of it. Is it more you have more beds for men than you do women?
Yes, we do. And the reason why that is our women's shelter is set up. It was originally set up to be a domestic violence shelter, and so it's set up to be a little more private area than our men's shelter is, and so it kind of gives them a little, and also for liability reasons, we need to keep it separate from the men.
Okay.
And so there's children there, there's women there, and so we got to keep them protected, so to speak. We have that set up differently there. So since it's privatized, it's going to be a little less bedding there than it will be with the men.
So it makes sense to me now more, because it does seem that you can put more men together in a smaller space than you would a woman and a child. You want to give them bigger space and have more you have a better accommodations, if you will, for them.
Well, at least more private accommodations, a little more private.
Yeah. I have a full screen. I wanted to bring that up. I was going to ask if Jason could do that for me, because I also want to take a look at some of the other services that are offered at the Salvation Army. We are looking at hunger relief, housing, and homeless services. We've been talking about that. Christmas assistance, youth camps and recreation. We're talking about Croc centers. What is a Croc Center?
Well, we have a Croc Center in our territory, in our division actually. In Biloxi, there's a Croc Center down there. It's basically like a YMCA, but it's done by the Salvation Army. And it's kind of a different, the widow of the founder of the McDonald's gave a large donation to the Salvation Army to set these Croc Centers up in different areas. We don't have a Croc Center in Anniston or in our area, but they are very good centers to have, and in some locations that they're at, and so we're happy to be able to partner with them and the donation that was given to us to do that.
Okay, and I believe I have another full screen. It's a full screen. I want to take a look at that. Adult Rehabilitation, Veteran Affairs Services, Prison Ministries, Elderly Services, Combating Human Trafficking and Missing Persons. Let's go back to that second one from the bottom, Combating Human Trafficking.
Yeah, 100,000 children
Salvation
every year.
Army is huge with that, and that's one that I had no idea that you guys worked at that capacity. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, a lot of times people understand the Salvation Army with the red kettle, or they might think about the Salvation Army doing disaster services.
Of course.
Or they might even remember the Salvation Army Family Store. But to know that we're involved in, and we're almost one of the top agencies against human trafficking. We've been dealing with this issue for many years now, and it's a big issue for us. 100,000 kids, 100,000 in the United States alone are in human trafficking, and so we have to fight this issue. We have to fight this issue hard.
Okay. When we come back, we're going to talk more about human trafficking and Salvation Army's role in that particular endeavor. We'll be right back with more Local Matters.
We can talk about.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Local Matters, where living local never felt so good. Never felt so good to have Corps Officer Major Eric Roberts.
Yes.
You know what? Sometimes I think my mind is just going. You know, that's what happens when you get old. But at least I got your title right now that we're almost done with the entire show. So welcome aboard. Before we went to break, we were talking about some of the many services that the Salvation Army provides for the community. But one that I was really surprised with, and that was the program that talks about or really works in human trafficking. And so I was really surprised at that. You were telling us that you guys sort of lead the way in that effort.
Well, we've been involved in it for some time. I'm not leading the way. That might be a stretch, but at least we're involved in it, and we have make a major emphasis on that every year.
So you're addressing that. I wanted to, Jason, if you can zoom in on this. This is huge. This is coming up. It says, "We will not be silent." Okay, there it is. We've got that. This is an event that's coming up. I want to hold it up. There we go. On September the 27th, coming up, this is an annual day of prayer for victims of human trafficking. Talk to us about this event that's coming up. Where will this event be?
It's going to be at our church services on Sunday morning, and Salvation Army does have church services every Sunday morning at 11. We're going to have a special guest speaker. The manager of our women's shelter is going to be speaking on the topic of human trafficking and how the Salvation Army works to combat that, and even in our country and in countries around the world. In countries around the world.
So here we go again. You got to know that anytime you're working with something of that magnitude, then you're working with so many other organizations and agencies to make this happen. Have you actually been there and witnessing maybe a reunification process? Because a lot of times when we walk into stores and Walmart and places of that nature and we see children's pictures there, a lot of times this is what could be going on with that child.
It's possible. It's very possible, at least in this day and age. But
with
reunifications are kind of hard to come by. Once they get involved in this situation, sometimes the children don't, and I say children, but the average age of a person that gets sold in human trafficking is about 12 years old. So these young kids or even young adults are sometimes put into a situation that they don't feel they can get out. And so they feel trapped just as much as maybe an abused woman would feel trapped in their abuser's hands. So they don't know how to get out. And because they're so young, when they get into it, they don't know of a way to get out. So it's only those few rare cases that we see in the news when somebody is able to get out of that situation.
Yes.
And we're so overjoyed when we see those things, but we still work to try to stop that. There are ways we can stop it. There are avenues that the sexual industry, the porn industry, they use human trafficking to get their victims. And so if we were able to, curb that,
at least that'll be a
that
start.
Activity, that'd be
That's
a
start right there.
But there's also magazines. There's also all kinds of other
all
avenues.
of these incentives for young people to think that can allure them and make them feel as though this is exciting, something I want to do, and then realize this is a nightmare and I can't even get out.
Right.
It takes money to do anything. We know that. I know that Salvation Army work a lot with grants and donations, things of that magnitude. So just recently, you had an event that was going on right here in Anniston. It was called a Customer Appreciation Day.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that event.
It was a fun day. We wanted to try to appreciate the customers that come to our family store, and we have a number of customers that come every day to our family stores that are regulars. They know the the situation of our family store. They know that the money that we raise in our family store goes to help support the women's shelter.
And I would be one, people. If anyone knows me, they know that is one of my biggest hobbies. I love going to consignment stores, to thrift stores, and Salvation Army is my friend. And I go in there and I love looking for things. I went out of there the other day with 2 beautiful lamps. So yes, and I feel good because not only is it a hobby I enjoy doing, but I realize that what I put in to the Salvation Army goes back to help families.
Yes, and it helps people in our community, and we're happy to be able to. That's one of the ways that we raise money in the community to do the programs that we do.
And then and because most people know that one of your biggest fundraisers is, of course, at Christmas time, during the holiday times, people out there with the was it the Red Kettle?
Red Kettle,
with
yeah,
the Red
Kettle
Kettle.
campaign, yeah.
There it is, the Red Kettle. And then speaking of that, it was a young lady. There it is on the screen. It was a young lady that worked for the Salvation Army just this past holiday.
Wow.
She was amazing. I don't know.
I've heard about her.
I don't think you were in the area this time last year, but she worked for Salvation Army, and I saw her at Walmart, and she was over at Winn-Dixie, and she was so great. She even made the Anniston Star did an article on her, and I'm told that people were just dropping money into her Red Kettle. Yeah. So tell me, the history of Salvation Army. That Red Kettle has been around now for what, 150 years?
At least 100. I think about 106. But anyway, Captain Joseph McPhee was the first one who and he called it a Simpson's pot. And this Simpson's pot that he was collecting money in was to get money for a meal that he was going to do for the holidays. And as he did that, he made enough money to do the meal for the holidays. I can't imagine that he would ever have thought that one little pot would have reached the magnitude of what it is today to give millions of meals, not just one.
That's right.
So that's what our Red Kettle campaign does. We raise money during the Christmas time in the Red Kettle campaign that lasts us throughout the year.
Okay. And it's amazing, as you mentioned, what one Red Kettle, it was started with one Red Kettle, and coming up soon, as we approach, or we're going into the holiday season, we're going to be seeing so many more Red Kettles. So just keep that in mind as you're out in just a few months. We're going to be out holiday shopping. Don't forget to drop your donation into the Red Kettle, because it's going to do so much and so good for those in need, for right here in our own hometown, right here in Calhoun County. We'll see you back next week with more Local Matters.
So good, felt so good, so good, felt so good, felt so good.